Glenn, what's up? How you doing today?
Big man, good to be here again. Wow, we have a whirlwind of news to go through today, so buckle up, people. Hold on to something solid because we have a lot going on.
This guy, you know this guy, right? Everybody knows this guy.
You just referenced intentional pandemics. Do you harbour any doubts about the origins of COVID-19?
No, the evidence is very clear that it's naturally caused. It's a bad virus. And
is it naturally caused, Bill Gates?
Yeah, naturally caused in Wuhan, apparently. All of a sudden, they said it was a bat. Really, a bat. It's man-made. We know it.
Well, with the Fauci emails scandal, now it's clear that there's a lot more to the story than just a conspiracy. Like, there's a lot of evidence that research is being funded.
Like the WHO, non-government organizations who are telling the government how to govern the people in their own countries. We should be appalled at this. We know what's best for us. We don't need Mr. Fauci, who looks to be tied at the hip to Mr. Gaetz, and they're the new version of me and mini-me. We don't need them to tell us what's healthy. You just look at them and you say, well, you don't look particularly that healthy. Why would I believe what you're saying? And also, you're making a fortune on the pharmaceutical corporations. You create the problem to profit off of it.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because the House of Representatives in U.S. is trying to pass a bill, H.R. 79, that is supporting defunding and support of WHO. Because for the clear reasons, WHO is not an elected body. It's not appointed by any of the elected officials in U.S., or in Canada, or anywhere else in the world, and they're the ones who set rules and determine, plans of actions for the man-made, viruses released.
Can you imagine taxing the people and giving away our money to these people to do damage to us? Oh, what's going on, people? Let's come up to speed of what's really going on. We have to discern the truth.
Well, what really is going on is exactly the information, the truth as we're talking about. We have a hard time receiving the truth because the channels, we know for a fact whatever you hear on legacy media is going to be propaganda. It's going to be a press release for whatever purpose. But even now with internet, we're having difficulty, and we've been having difficulty. All those politicians been banned, and including all the people that question the narrative, they were deemed to be dangerous for the societies for spewing propaganda and hate and all that stuff. What we find out, it was actually government directed. Let's watch this.
The government was in the censorship business in a huge way. That's, I think, provable now. And not just one agency, really every conceivable wing of the enforcement agencies of the U.S. government were in some way or another sending moderation requests to Twitter. And in many cases, those requests were being fulfilled. And they were coming from everywhere, from every place from the NSA to the HHS to FBI, DHS, and even what they call other government agencies, which I think is code for the CIA. So we have reports from all over, from states, from police departments, everywhere.
Wow, we just heard the alphabet soup. And it's just one of the first times I didn't hear about the LGBTQS WXYZ community involved in this too.
Well, they probably were. They probably were because if I go back to this Bill Gates's video, which I don't want to pull his face up anymore. One of the questions the reporter asked him did you do anything about? And you can look it up. Bill Gaetz on ABC Australia, I believe that was the video. One of the questions she asked him right after this little bit that we're playing in the beginning is, what did you do with all this information? Because there was an idea that you were putting microchips in the people with all the, jabs that were promoted for your health, right? Quote unquote, be healthy, get a jab, right? So the one of the things Bill Gaetz said was like, or she asked him, did you contact the the techno companies, the platforms, to do something about it? And it's clear he says it. Yes, I absolutely addressed it, right? And since he's a technocrat himself, somehow he probably has the network and the finances to do it, because he's the guy who sponsors absolutely everything, including the WHO. But, you know, we still have some good people on our side. And again, we are winning and we're the light. And here's one of those good peoples. Let's listen to Jim Jordan.
December 13th, the very first letter that the FTC sends to Twitter after the Twitter files, 11 days after the first Twitter file. There have been 5 of them come out. The FTC's first demand in that first letter after the Twitter files come out is identify all journalists, I'm quoting, identify all journalists and other members of the media to whom Twitter worked with. You find that scary, Mr. Taibbi, that you got a federal government agency asking a private company, who in the press are you talking with?
Yeah, I do find it scary. I think it's none of the government's business which journalists a private company talks to and why. I think every journalist should be concerned about that, and the absence of interest in that issue by my fellow colleagues in the mainstream media is an indication of how low the business has sunk. There was once a real esprit de corps and camaraderie within media. Whenever one of us was gone after, we all kind of rose to the challenge and supported.
Obviously, these are the prostitutes. They're paid to put out propaganda. What we want to do is get the real press back in the game again. There's a reason why the First Amendment was the right to free speech. That's number one importance. And then number 2 was the right to bear arms. The reason why is that's to protect the number 1 amendment, the right to free speech, against horrible governance. And now it's being exposed. And it's going to come into Canada too, because Canada right now with its C-11 amendments are wanting to try and control the streaming that we get. So the propaganda will just come out on one side, and then things like Trudeau's stuff with China, that would be all of a sudden swept under the rug.
Well, let's listen to this nice lady. What's her name? It's Raquel Dancho, right? And she's a MP here in Canadian Parliament. She's really good.
And the Conservative Party. And certainly the elephant in the room here, as Monica Auer says, who's the Executive Director for Forum for Research and Policy and Communications, she said, if the government bureaucrats get to choose what contents to push on Canadians, there's a very real risk the government will be tempted to use its filtering power to silence its critics, which we've seen since time immemorial from governing authorities looking to quash dissent. It's happening right now in China and Russia, North Korea and Iran. Why would we open the door in Canada for a government to do that? I really don't understand. But yet here it is in the bill. And so if we don't need this, then why are we doing it? Content creators don't need it. They've had lots of success already. Why are we doing this? I don't know. I've yet to be convinced of the need for it at all. And I'll just conclude, Madam Speaker, with my final minute here on a quote from the leader of Canada's Conservatives, who said this very well, and the threat that this poses to the liberties that Canadians enjoy and the success that they've received online with the freedoms we, at least today, have for now. He said, we live in a free country. Every day, ordinary Canadians should be allowed their own megaphone, and the only limit on how loud and how vast their voices should be whether people choose to listen to them. Everyday Canadians should be able to decide what they like by voting with their clicks. That is the kind of liberty we should extend to the Canadian people. In the marketplace of ideas, there is no role for state coercion and intimidation. There is no role for nameless, faceless government bureaucrats to decide who is heard and who is not. Everyday Canadian people should have the freedom to do that for themselves. Madam Speaker, after 8 years, it's time for a government that protects freedom of speech.
Well, and that's Chinada in a nutshell, right? If the C-11 actually passes, how are we different from North Korea? You know, yeah, go ahead.
What they want to do is silence the critics. Right now in Canada, that would mean all the Canadian population, because they're very, very critical of this neoliberalist governance that we have going on that keeps fleecing its own people. Taxes are at all-time high. Debts are at all-time high. The government debt is at or near its all-time high. We'll probably never be able to pay off the debt. The Canadian dollar is losing its value, so we import most of what we consume, and so inflation is going to stay high at just the same time as the economy is going to be slowing down. We've been set up by this government, and so you will not be able to silence the critics, because that means silencing just about all Canadians who actually know what's going on, and they're the ones who are going to vote and make a real democratic voting system arise again.
Well, do you want to listen to what the Canadian Conservative leader has to say about this? I do. Let's do this.
Protecting the safety of the people serving this country. He's interested in protecting the Liberal Party of Canada. The question was how much his party got in illegal donations funneled from Beijing. I've asked the question twice now. He refuses to answer it. He distracts and now claims that he can't tell it.
Glenn, I believe that's actually, that's exactly what you just said. This is the reason why they want to control the information that's being out there specifically for that. So people actually don't know that a government is a runaway train sponsored by a communist country.
Canadians entering into the hardest time that they've ever saw. And yet here you have people in the Liberal Party taking alleged donations from foreign countries, foreign interference, to put them in power. So in other words, they're taking money from other countries to take away the power of the Canadian people.
Well, it is treason. And where's RCMP with all this, right? Well, actually, I do have an answer for this, I think, but let's listen. I want to listen to the rest of the speech.
Because it would harm national security? Give me a break. It would harm his political career. Why doesn't he tell us how much the Liberal Party or its various arms received in money from Beijing? How much?
Honorable Prime Minister.
Honorable, yeah. What's honorable about that guy?
Speaker, it is unfortunate and despicable that any member in this House would question the loyalty to Canada of any other member in this House. I understand.
But, he's not stuttering, so it's a prepared response. He knows that he's going to get grilled in the parliament, and that's why it's going like this.
Maybe he's taking an antidepressant.
Those who serve.
He looks angry. Look at him. He's showing his teeth.
Safe is quite disgusting.
Oh, disgusting.
That would be like being bitten by a goldfish, really.
No drama lesson will distract from the question that I asked. The question was very clear. How much did the Liberal Party get in donations directed from Beijing? I've asked it multiple times. I find it incredible that he can't stand up and answer with a zero. Totally. I mean, if he knows for sure it didn't happen, if he's not been briefed to the contrary, he would say so right now. Yeah. But he's dodging the question. He's trying to engage in a dramatic distraction. So I will give him one.
He's a drama teacher,
Answer the question. How much money did his party get from the dictatorship in Beijing? How much?
I think he's going to have to take another antidepressant.
I see the leader of the opposition trying to backtrack from his heinous and disgusting accusations of disloyalty to Canada of anyone in this House. And I'm pleased to see him back off from what was an
Whoa. He didn't his charity just return $200,000 back to you? Like, it's already a fact. They've done this. Like, they received funding, which they're backtracking already.
Yeah,
and that's the stuff they got caught with. That's why they returned it.
He's done. And people in the Liberal Party know it. He's done. Canada knows it. People in the Liberal Party know it. The people who put him in charge at the World Economic Forum know it. They're probably looking to replace him with some other puppet muppet.
Well, my question is, what was his qualification to be prime minister in the first place? Is disingenuous. What? He's just because of his last name? Is that the only thing? He took it. That's pretty low, Justin. I'm addressing you right now. I mean, he is, if your qualification to join the party and also to be nominated and become a prime minister of Canada is only legacy of your father's last name, that's pretty low qualification. I mean, maybe the blackface qualified him to be prime minister. What do you think about that?
This is not a monarchy here. This is almost like a banana republic.
I think it is. I don't think. What do you mean almost?
Well, after he's gone, then we'll get back to good.
I want to see what he has to say. Is there anything more he has to say?
despicable partisan approach. But it does go to the point that Canadians need to have confidence that the answers that they are seeking on foreign interference and on the integrity of our democratic institutions are being dealt with by experts. Now, there's two ways of doing that. One is by making
experts.
And politicians of all parties get classified briefings on that, which the NSICOP does.
I don't.
Paid experts on his side to make him look good or to hide all the truth that's coming out. Too late. Even the mainstream media seems to be hanging him out to dry because they want to save themselves too. Speaking of the mainstream media, the CBC, who he gave huge amount of money to keep solvent, shall we say. They gave their average employee a $17,000 bonus in 2022. Where'd all this money come from?
Well, they come from a taxpayer. You know, like that's my money. You know, why? Well, I think sending it to Ukraine would have been a better choice. At least we know where it went.
Well, you see, the government is inefficient. The tax dollars are not enough to pay for the government's existence. So they're going to the central bank and borrowing money from the central bank, which is just printing new dollars into existence. And they're sending this money all around the world and covering up their own stuff here in Canada. Meanwhile, Canadians are not only paying it in taxes, but they're paying it through a hidden tax called inflation. You have too much of the currency supply. It's a fiat currency. It's not based on anything. And now it's affecting people because they're getting little raises, but these raises put them into a higher tax bracket, so they're not making any more money, yet the cost of living, just them to be living the same as they did this year, as they did last year, is costing them exponentially more.
Well, here's a theory. You know how this immigration throughout the world now, it's not to increase, although like Ramon, right? A new associate, Ramon, he's an amazing dude. He immigrated here from Honduras, and he came here to contribute to the society in the way that he can grow in it. He is wants to be self-employed. He wants to have his own business, and more than that, he wants to have multiple irons and multiple fires, right? He's amazing. He's the guy who comes here to contribute to the society, and he comes with traditional values. He comes here to build the society and not to destroy the society. But I believe the immigration that's been going on for past X amount of years, and I don't know how far back going, 10, 20 years, it's directly correlated with bringing down lowering the quality of living, lowering the standard of living throughout the Western society, killing the middle class. And how would you do it? Is by introducing China into Canada and making it a Chinada. And one of the things that is already pretty alarming is things like the laws that we're trying to implement here is like C-11, where a total censorship of the Canadian content creators will be installed, as well as something really creepy is that we have Chinese police stations already here at first implementing control over its own citizens residing in Canada. If you don't believe me, this comes from Global News, so it has to be truth. You know, the legacy media. Let's listen to this.
RCMP officials say Chinese Canadians living in Montreal are being threatened by the Chinese government.
I can't get into any specifics, but it could be threats to their safety or the safety of their loved ones in China.
The allegations led them to investigate what police are calling Chinese police stations, masquerading as family resource centers.
Its aim could be to infiltrate the Canadian economy, to infiltrate our democracy. We don't really know at this point what the aim is, other than to pressure members of the Chinese community to, further the communists,
Hold on. That's an RCMP member that doesn't know what the communist organization doing on the streets of Montreal, that possibly infiltrating the politics and economy and all that stuff. You tell me that's normal, Glenn? You tell me that's not by design?
This is another sign that the people who are controlling everything are losing the fight. And the patriots, the good people are coming up, because this would never have gotten out 5 years ago.
You think that's it? Or it wasn't there 5 years ago? Or you think it just gotten so crazy where people's like, whoa, this is way too far. This is way too far.
No, the cat's out of the bag.
The cat's out of the bag. But that's crazy to me. Let's listen to the rest of this thing.
The China's Communist Party agenda.
One of the centers is in Montreal's downtown.
Do you know that the RCMP is investigating this
Yes,
place?
we know that.
The second one on Montreal's South Shore.
You know that this place is being investigated?
Oh, yes, when they about to put me in.
I know, he said. We aren't the first ones.
I admit I was extremely surprised.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says they've been aware for months that these stations have been popping up across Canada. The RCMP has also detected similar ones in Vancouver and Toronto. We are tremendously worried, he said. It shows to what point the Chinese and Iranian diaspora communities are the target of foreign intervention.
Well, first, it is absolutely unacceptable that any foreign power...
Didn't we just hear him say in the parliament that he has no clue what conservative leaders talking about? And here he admits, yet we have those things popping up left and right.
Let's pop open a little truth here. First of all, we do not hate Justin Trudeau, because when you hate, it really does cloud your judgment. And this is what we want to do, is we want to clear people's judgment. So I would say that I greatly dislike Mr. Trudeau for what he's doing to Canada. His horrible policies, his lack of good policies. It's all coming out. It's being exposed. Let's go, good people. Keep putting it out there. It's time for a change.
Well, speaking of change, did you see this story? I know we're complaining about like interventions, like Chinese interventing in Western democracies. You know, we have a democracy here, right? Yeah, right. But Chinese bill, you know, we just covered the story. I ain't got to go back to that. But us as Canadians, as Westerners and Americans and other Western interests, we intervene in other people's democracies left and right. And this is not on the main news. Well, it probably is, but we're not paying attention to it as much as, you know, the Ukrainian thing going on, which we'll mention in a second. But if you read this article or you watched anything in the news about what's going on in Georgia, but first of all, Glenn, do you know where Georgia is? And what is Georgia?
Georgia is one of the Baltic states, the breakaway from the old Soviet Union.
See, I got you. It's not a Baltic state. It's a Caucasus state. It's south of Russia, right? It's the one of the it's on a Caspian Sea.
Oh,
so it's actually down. They have a really nice weather there. By the way, disclaimer: I love Georgians. I love Georgian cuisine. I love Georgian culture. I believe they're the closest related to Basques, so Spanish people. Like, so it's a very similar. The language is similar. Their cuisine is kind of Mediterranean / Middle Eastern. It's very unique in their own spices. If you've never been to a real Georgian restaurant, please find it. It's really, really tasty. It'll probably be one of your favorite restaurants. Reminds sort of kind of like of Greek cuisine in terms of health values, but don't quote me on that. Now, what's going on in Georgia now? So the people protesting, but those protests are against, I'll just read you the article. What triggered the protest? Thousands of people took to the streets of Georgian capital Tbilisi this week after Parliament backed a draft law which critics who called it a Russian law, you know, and since, you know, I have a Russian background, I have a lot at stake here being a Russian, but said would limit press freedom and undercut Georgia's efforts to become a candidate for EU membership. Wow. The law backed by the ruling Georgian Dream Party, oh, I'm a dreamer, would require any organizations receiving more than 20% of their funding from overseas to register as foreign agent or face substantial fines. Glenn, doesn't that remind you of the story we just mentioned here in Canada? So basically, isn't it a good thing that you want people to know whose interest your politician representing?
Well, let's face it. We all know that we have puppet governments here in the West, and the military power of the West installs puppet governments in many countries in the world to control the revenue sources.
Well, also it's to, like, in this particular case, that would be encircling which power? Russia, right? And Russia, we know, we don't need to mention the stories and the news of the past 10 years, the past year, and right now. Why is it important? All right, so they already had a similar conflict previously with Georgia, based on the same premise, where Georgia's been used as an army base for the Western interest. And by the way, biolabs as well. The same biolabs that were found in Ukraine are also found in Georgia. And protesters there now protesting this. And it's it's very reminiscent of Maidan, in 2014 in Ukraine. And you see a lot of Ukrainian flags, by the way, in the Georgian protest. They don't even deny it. So we'll pay attention to the story. We'll keep you upbeat with this to see what's going on. But I know you don't want the foreign power to be invested into your political story, just like we don't want Chinese sponsoring the liberal government here. It's probably not a good idea for Belize's political parties to be representing interest of the Western government, because we know that doesn't lead to anything good. We have a number of countries that we can list that it basically dismantled and ruined all the resources, human and natural. What else is in the stories here today? Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of Ukraine in the story, Zelensky is in trouble. Oscars reject Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky bid to appear on telecast. I believe that might be even the second time in a row. How do you feel about that, Glenn?
It's obvious Ukraine is in trouble. Zelensky here, he's in trouble. And that's why Hollywood doesn't want to do any association with him, because, let's face it, Hollywood has been in trouble for a while, too.
So do you see the shift now? Like, the Hollywood is now trying to distance themselves from the Zelensky in Ukraine thing. Like, not so long ago, Sean Penn made this documentary, and he admitted it was biased, where Zelensky is an actor himself, and is actually a very successful producer. And I watched some of his shows, not his shows, but the shows that he produced, and some of the family-oriented stuff is really, really good. But I'm not here to promote Zelensky's production company, but he was really good at what he's done with entertainment. Nobody can take that away from him. But in terms of what's going on in Ukraine and amount of corruption, don't take my word for it. Let's go to Matt Gaetz. You got something to say about this, Glenn?
I just wondering who's the better actor, Zelensky or Trudeau? Because they're a couple of hams.
I'll say Zelensky.
Thank you, gentleman. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gaetz, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Storch, you're our watchdog. Ukraine has a corruption problem, right?
There's a long history of issues with corruption in Ukraine.
Infrastructure minister arrested for stealing $400,000. Deputy head of Zelensky's office can't explain where the sports cars came from, so he had to resign. Deputy defense minister resigned over contracting corruption, but the defense ministry put out a statement that his resignation was a worthy deed. And the wife of a former Ukrainian politician was found with $22 million in cash crossing the border into Hungary last year. Seems as though a lot of the zeal for enforcement of the anti-corruption efforts seems to align with the Republican control of the House of Representatives in our country. Maybe that's a coincidence. But let's get to this end-use monitoring you testified to. The Arms Control Act of 1996 requires end-use monitoring for certain defense articles that are sold or leased, right?
Correct.
And there's no feature.
I'm going to clarify. You know what that means, end-use? It's like, let's say I'm going to procure some kind of component, some kind of part, like electronics part, that could be used dually. Let's say it's a microchip. And I can use it in a computer, to make a home computer, or I can use it in the military hardware, like a computer that could be used for the missile radar system or something like this. So the end use, you need to clarify it and certify that the microchip that's going out somewhere is going to be used by non-terrorists, by it would fall into non-nuclear proliferation treaty and all this other stuff, which would have been dismantled. And that's what he's referring to by end use.
Of anything we've passed that exempts what we've given to Ukraine from those requirements in the Arms Control Act, right?
Not exempts. There are different provisions as to how that plays out in different circumstances.
Controlling law, controlling policy. And here's the upshot. as you testify here today, you cannot testify truthfully under oath that the DOD has complied with the policy and law regarding end-use monitoring during all times of this conflict. Isn't that right?
So I want to be careful here when I respond to you, Congressman, to make sure that I'm
very, very careful.
Glenn. That's a no. That's a no.
As long as he says, I want to be very, very careful.
Let's listen.
We are conducting a series of evaluations that look at the controls that DOD has in place to ensure that they are taking the steps that are required.
I get all that, but here's the operative question. We haven't complied with end-use monitoring according to the law with everything we've sent to Ukraine to date, have we?
So our 2020 report, which is our last public report on this,
the answer is no. I'll help him out.
Made a number of recommendations. All of those have been
I know, but you're sort of dodging the question. You cannot testify that we have complied with the end-use monitoring requirements at all times during this conflict, can you?
So we have an ongoing
Glenn, that's 3 times in a row.
I don't know. Don't you just want to flush them? Just go. Never mind. So you're gone.
Let's do this.
Evaluation.
I get that it's ongoing. I'm looking backwards. You cannot testify that everything is complied with the law and the end-use monitoring, can you?
So some of that gets into the classified report.
Right.
Oh, here you go. Here you go. Classified report.
If you could testify to that, you would. You're citing a classified report. I don't know why that report's classified. I think the American people deserve to know if this 1996 law is being followed or not. You can't testify that it is being followed, and so I think they can draw reasonable conclusions from that. Do we have, Dr. Call, do we have DOD personnel in Ukraine now?
We do. We have a couple dozen at the embassy.
Other than the embassy, any other personnel?
Nope.
How about CIA? Are they training folks in Ukraine?
I'm not going to talk about that in an unclassified setting. Happy to talk about that further in the classified briefing.
Is the Azov battalion getting access to U.S. weapons?
Not that I'm aware of, but if you have information,
I'd seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the Global Times investigative report that that talks about training. It's from the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Research Lab, citing that the Azov Battalion was even getting stuff as far back as 2018.
Without objection, so ordered.
Any reason to disagree with that assessment, Dr.
Is this the? I'm sorry. Is this the Global Times from China?
No, this is.
So it's important now. Now Chinese sources are important.
Do you swear not to tell the truth, the whole truth, and anything but the truth? I do. This is Congress working at people who work for getting people to be exposed in all these operatives. Way to go, Mr. Gaetz. He's a modern day hero.
You know what I think is happening? Like it's clear that we covered this story. It's a dead horse. We beat it to death, right? It's 100% now that Ukraine is a money laundering operation, from Biden's family to everything you just heard, military industrial complex. And by the way, we cut the video short, but later on he said, this is not yesterday's video. I think it's 2 weeks ago. But the one of the things he's mentioned in there that a lot of the budget going there to to support Ukrainian economy, which is screwed. There's no more Ukrainian economy. And part of that, part of the funding goes towards providing pensions to Ukrainian citizens. And I'm all for that, to help Ukrainian people, because it's not their fault that the government chose the corrupt route and, started the war. And we can blame Russia for the war all we want. But, I don't support, by the way, brothers and sisters, I do not support the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. I do not support Russian war. I only support American wars. American wars against Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Kosovo, name it, all this stuff. That's the only wars I support. That's my disclaimer. I do not support Russian wars. I only support American wars because they're really good at it. You got to be on the side of a good. That's what I meant.
The West should stop sending money and arms to keep the conflict going. Let's send people with the ability to resolve the conflict. The least amount of people that have to die and get hurt and get maimed, the better. And while this is going on, the West is led to believe that, Ukraine is going to be good, this and that. Ukraine's inflation is at 25%. We complain over here in the West, it's at 6%. Over there, it's 25%. That's a big hit. Oh, that's a financial bomb, besides all the other bombs going on.
Well, I have a theory, and okay, it's maybe not out of the, maybe it's not so extraordinary. The theory is that what's going on there is Zelensky had to sacrifice his country and his people for the riches that he just obtained for himself, his family, and his cronies. He had to do it. Hollywood thing. Like we know about Illuminatis and Hollywood sacrificial practices. And now there's a video surfacing of Angelina Joly admitting 20 years ago that she's been part of that ritual. And, there's people like Lady Gaga and all that stuff. They're part of that disclosure movement that, it is a cult, and it's satanic cult.
This is why Hollywood is in trouble, and now they're being exposed. And so now some of the people who were working for the terminology is Illuminati. These are the power controllers. They're coming out and wanting to give hints to try and save the rest of their existence on the planet.
Probably. This is an old video. Let's watch this.
It's like I would film things like that. I would encourage like everybody, all different types of sexual. But there is that thing where it's like a lot of people misunderstand me with S&M and they think it's super. And I have to like explain to people how, like, where it's more like you're tied down because you need to like be able to like have somebody hold you down and keep you still, or like you fight and have something down. Or, like.
Yeah, so you can watch the rest of the video. It's not that hard to find online. It's pretty actually easy. I'm not going to play the rest of it, but she comes out and she explains that the ritual where they hold you down to have you experience the submission, where you submit to the powers to be that actually will give you all the riches and the power in the movie industry, where you need to submit to the agenda. And let's remind you, like, one of the things that she done, she removed all her female organs so she doesn't get cancer later on in life, because this is how you protect yourself from cancer, by removing your female organs. I believe her kids transitioning. I don't know. I think she's doing that. She's one of those people in Hollywood that kind of sacrifice your children into this. And her father, John Voight, right? He's been really vocal about that. How he lost his daughter to the dark forces. But there's more to the stories. But information is always going to come out, just like this one, right? It is going to take a little bit of time, but unfortunately, like Ukrainian story, we always knew it was corrupt, but then they switched the subject and it's like, oh no, they're just oppressed by the Russians. And now it's coming out again. No, they've always been corrupt and we're just laundering money over there. Some people always knew the pandemic was bullshit, bull crap.
Yes.
Right?
Save that one.
And now the Medicare data is actually shows that the jabs, the spikes, increases your chances of dying, not the other way around.
This is why the recorded deaths in many countries, it's making its way into the mainstream, and it's showing a big upshot. And that's going to be going on for the next 4 or 5 years. I believe that next year will be worse than what we're going to be seeing this year.
Well, this right here in the article that shows that the spikes are making more likely that elderly, and that's the Medicare data. That's directly from the medical records of patients, that they have to keep track of all this stuff. And if you ask, like, well, it's none of the people's business, if the person was, well, 2 years ago it was very much of people's business. You couldn't go anywhere unless you could prove, if you had the papers, certifying that you had a spike or not. And now if you ask a question like, well, this person dead prematurely or suddenly, or has some debilitating condition, and you ask a question, oh, how many spikes did he receive? And the question is like, how dare you to ask him? That's his privacy. It's between him and his doctor, right? Well, this Medicare data comes out and shows that the risk of death remains elevated for unknown period of time after you get a shot. And CDC lied to American people about the safety of those vaccines. We know that, and also we know about efficacy. You know, they always told us, get it, because you will stop the transmission, you save your grandmother, you'll save the obese person, you'll save anybody with compromised immune system, you'll save anybody who can't get a job. So yeah, it's your choice not to have a choice. You know, choose to be a good citizen.
Let's take away the power from the WHO and the CDC. They have other agendas. They were created specifically for these agendas. I believe there's a population reduction trying to happen right now, and this was one of the agendas for it. It's going to be through disease, famine, war. Let's take the power away from the few and give it back to the many. We're the winners, not them.
Well, I believe in the new document released, the Pfizer, right? They don't even deny that that was done for the population reduction. I think that was part of the narrative, right, in their own internal documents. If we continue with this different article, and this is like, okay, remember how mask, no mask, triple mask, N95 mask, and now they're officially publishing the studies, even though they were published way before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic, but now the rhetoric stays. It has published a new Cochrane review of the literature on masks, including trials during the COVID-19 pandemic in hospitals and community settings. The trials compared outcomes of wearing surgical mask versus wearing no mask, and also wearing a surgical mask versus N95 mask. And the review, conducted by dozens of researchers from 6 countries, concludes that wearing any kind of face covering probably makes little or no difference in reducing the spread of respiratory illness. Woohoo! And Glenn, you didn't know that, right? That was news to you just now. You had to read this article to know this somehow.
I don't even read that, but what I know is all wars are banker wars. Okay? Now, the banks are losing control of the monetary system. So now they found a way to do a war against the people and the population. And we're paying the price for this now. This 2.5, almost 3 years of this scamdemic. I mean, even today, they don't even want to let the best tennis player in the world come into America, you know, to play a couple of games of tennis. And, you know, maybe because he's Serbian. I don't know. Maybe if he was from Australia or England, maybe he would have a free pass in here. But he's from Serbia, which seems to be more aligned with Russia. So maybe it's a political move.
Or he's just he's just an element in the equation that rubs the wrong side of the people. He shows that, you know, I'm healthy, I'm maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and I don't need your health advice. And by the way, it's crazy. Like, the most draconian laws implemented associated with the pandemic was in Australia and New Zealand, and he happened to go to Australia and play there, but he cannot come to Florida. You know, now we have to have DeSantis ask the federal government, please let him in. Please let him in. Although, by the way, like, the state law always trumps the federal law, for those of you who don't know. But not when it comes down to the safety and security of the borders, right? Apparently. However, I'm sure I have an advice for him. If he sneaks through the southern border, he has time. That's my advice. Fly into Mexico and then just pay one of the coyotes or whatever they call them, right? To help you cross the border. I mean, you guy in good shape. It could be like a training workout for you. You know, choose the desert route. It's not so hot right now. And you'll be in Florida in no time. You know, have somebody pick you up in Texas. That's my advice. I'm 100%. You wouldn't need a jab or a spike shot then, because it doesn't require of the people that cross border illegally. It's just only if you cross it legally, you would need it. It's okay.
You know, with the massive wake up that's going on, and wake up not to be, you know, mixed up with woke. But the massive wake up that's going on about everything that's happening in the world, coming back into a little micro area, Canada's top general concerned military lacks capacity to lead Haiti mission. Here we have the leader of the country telling the mighty country of Russia that this and that, we oppose you and we're sending arms to Ukraine and we're sending money and this and that. And we can't even, the top military general says that we probably can't even help out a little Haiti against all the gangs and infiltration of the government, which, by the way, we have an infiltration of the government going on here in Canada.
Well, but they're not infiltrating Russia and Ukraine and other places for control and installing the democracies. It's just done to align their pockets with the currencies and other assets, right? It's all, like you said, it's a banker thing, and that's the power. Imagine if like ordinary people like Zelensky and, well, ordinary people, they're not that ordinary, but, pawns in the game like Zelensky, Trudeau, Fauci, the people just that pawns in the game, they're making millions and millions of dollars, and that's sent throughout the world into their offshore accounts and different investments. How much money at stake for real? Like if they send $100 billion, let's say they send $100 billion and Zelensky made $300 million out of that $100 billion. Where's the rest of the billions go? How the money is washed. I'm sure some of the money end up somewhere in Ukraine in terms of some kind of funding and some kind of arms and whatever. But that's $100 billion of dollars. How are they accounted for? Where's it going? Which banks? Which families? Which reptiles? I don't know. Vampires. Who runs this world when it comes to that? Let's just close this story with the salt.
Champ, everything is a choice. And the populace, which is the numbers of the world, allow their government to do what they want because that's their choice. They can't be bothered to get involved, or they're dissuaded from wanting to learn the truth. But even at the individual level, something so small and so unimportant in the whole world, yet very, very important for the individual. The world is consuming way too much salt, and outcome would be dire if we don't cut back. Again, the WHO report. Now, we've known that for a long time. I had a guy that I know. We were sitting there in a restaurant, and I ordered something healthy, of course, and he ordered something, I would say, not as healthy. And he was complaining that he has high blood pressure. So I told him, I said, well, you have a high blood pressure since you don't smoke anymore, which is a good thing, but you're going to have to lay off the salt. Just as soon as I finished telling him that was a big cause of his high blood pressure, he puts the salt on his food. And so I said, what are you doing? He says, come on, you got to live. I said, well, you don't look like you're living too well. This looks like you're trying to kill yourself slowly. The taste is more important than your high blood pressure.
Well, it's the instant gratification, right? We go for something that is going back to discipline. And how do you know opposite? Also, how do you know what does it make you feel? Like instantly gratifying yourself. Oh, like instant. Okay, it tastes so good. I gotta put salt on. By the way, it doesn't actually. If you used to eating food without putting additional salt on it or sugar and everything else, you actually start to taste food itself.
Speaking of health, I just read this morning in Montreal, street drugs being mixed with animal tranquilizers to give a new type of high. Now, we hear about the war against drugs. Maybe America is passing some type of law so that they can go into another country to round up the so-called drug pushers, the drug dealers, the cartels. But the real problem is you have the people in our own countries who want to take this stuff. There's a market for it all the time. So I don't care who you bring down, there's always going to be somebody else to pop up. So what you have to do, instead of spending all the money and effort and energy to try and crush the cartels, you should spend the resources to try and wake up the people as to realize, why is it that people in first world countries want to consume this stuff? Why like the salt? Why do you want to keep continually hurting yourself?
Well, you're asking a very interesting question. We are not educated. We are not raised to be critical thinkers. We are raised followers. So why would you question anything? Submit to the authority. So on this particular note, Glenn, you have a last thought. Let's close this with your thoughts.
It's a bit of a comedy. It's so stupid. Toronto, which is the fourth largest city in North America. Number 1 is Mexico. Number 2, New York. Number 3 is LA. Number 4 is Toronto. Number 5 is Chicago. Okay. Somewhere in Toronto, they were forced to remove a no barking sign allowed at a popular dog park. Now, who would put a no barking sign at a dog park?
How do you enforce that? How do you enforce that, Glenn?
These are the people that are running, your city. Dumb as nails.
Is there like no bark police?
You
Like,
can't make this stuff up.
But seriously, who's going to enforce? Is the police going to enforce that?
I guess they have a prejudice against a dog that barks.
Oh, those racists. Well, what if I identify as a dog and I walk around barking? What category do I fit? Like, I guess they can ticket me directly then. By the way, brothers and sisters, I'm, as you know, I'm 7 feet tall, and I decided to change my identity and now identify as a 6 foot person, so I can buy and shoe size like 14. Okay, we'll do reasonable size 14. 14 you can still buy at the store. And so I'm sick and tired of looking for specialty stores and specialty deals online to buy clothes. Now, it's much better with invention of internet and online shopping and things like outlets where I can actually find clothing and shoes for myself. However, it's still very limited and still very difficult. So in light of all this, I chose to identify as a 6 foot person where I can still buy clothes right off the rack and buy the shoes off this. So yeah, I'm just staying in line with the current agenda of the world. And Glenn, from now on...
Good luck what you think after you keep banging your head. Yeah, good luck at thinking that you're 6 feet tall. All the power to you, sweetheart.
Glenn, you sound like you're a heightist. I need to report you to proper authority. We're going to get you canceled from the show.
Tell them to come and get me. I'm waiting. Good luck.
On this note, we're going to finish the show, brothers and sisters. Stay in the light. We're here actually not to discourage you or to divide you. We're here to show the comic and ridiculousness side of our existence here. And don't forget that you are spirits residing in this physical plane, and you experience in this physical life. And, just have fun with it. Because if we take ourselves too seriously and we go into our egos and we go into anger mode and we start hitting each other, there's a reason why I refer to you brothers and sisters, because you all are brothers and sisters. I have 2 sisters. I love them both. It's not that, I don't choose to love one more than another. And I love you too. Glenn, any last thoughts?
Oh, that was a good send-off for this one.
Okay. So we'll see you on the next one, brothers and sisters.